advocating for human rights for American farmers and farm workers. And I love this. I know he's controversial. Not everyone's going to like that. And I'm not supporting everything he said or did. One thing I like about him, he campaigned against illegal immigration because he understood that was part of the problem. But I love this quote. He said, "I am convinced that the truest act of courage, the strongest act of humanity, is to sacrifice ourselves for others in a totally non-violent struggle for justice." I can agree with that. Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat to a white passenger on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama. Then this actually led to the U.S. Supreme Court ruling the next year in 1956 that segregation on public buses was unconstitutional. And obviously, she had a lot greater impact than just that for social justice. October 14th, 1964, Martin Luther King Jr. won the Nobel Peace Prize for combating racial inequity through nonviolent resistance. And obviously, he's literally in the Hall of Fame as an American hero now. During his life, he led many marches, peaceful protests for the right to vote, desegregation, labor rights, and other civil rights. So what are we seeing happen now? This is what's been happening in LA. The reason why this event on June 14th is such a big deal is not because of what they're calling it, what they're saying that it's going to be. It's because of what just happened and the fact that what just happened in LA is fueling the fires of getting people to join this next event. So it's not what they're saying, it's the expectation from the public that's engaging that is the problem. That's the problem. All right, let me throw this video up while I'm sharing I'm just going to do most people know exactly what's happening right now in LA, what's been happening over the last 4 or 5 days. I'm just going to read this real quick. What we've seen. Anti-ICE protesters have marched and protested, but we've also seen them looting, spraying graffiti on public property, throwing bricks, throwing Molotov cocktails, other objects at police and civilians. The video evidence there is showing attempted murder. That's what it is. Burn vehicles, putting civilians' lives in danger, including children, destroying government and private property. So this is not, and I'm going to go ahead and pause that here because I'm not sure everything is going to be in that video, and there was a viewer discretion advised. But this is not a peaceful protest. This is absolutely not a peaceful protest. So we've seen a lot of videos surface, and I'm going to give you all a chance to talk in a minute. So just FYI, I'm not going to talk the whole time, but I do feel very passionate about this, especially since I found out yesterday from Doug that these June 14th protests are going to be happening in my hometown as well as the major cities around the United States. And so me talking, my daughter said to me this morning, she's like, "Dad, what are you streaming about today?" I told her, I explained the situation. And she goes, "Well, at least it's not going to happen here in Longview." And I said, "Well, it actually is, so there's that." Okay. This guy gets on this video and he talks about, and I'll just say this up front. I'm pretty sure this guy is faking it. I think he's making it up, right? But the video is viral, and it's because he's making a very good point. That's why. I'm pretty sure this guy wasn't there. I'll just say that. But he claims to have received $150 per day to be at this LA protest. And he said, "When I was out in Los Angeles protesting the ICE deportations for the past few days, the person who paid him told him to target certain streets. And when he got there and him and his friends got there, they noticed there were pallets of items laid out and ready to use. Pallets of bricks. That's convenient. But he got to thinking, man, whoever's funding this must really hate this country. And then instead of pallets of bricks at some of the later streets they're supposed to target, he said they eventually found pallets of flammable objects and other things. And as he was thinking about throwing a Molotov cocktail, he thought to himself, man, should I really be doing this?" So I'm pretty sure this guy is just taking advantage of what's trending right now. I don't think he really was there. I'm pretty sure he's just taking advantage of the conservative sharing platform, right? But he's making the points that he's making are true. Like that's what he's saying in this video is what was really happening, right? And if we had somebody come out and actually confess, that's probably pretty close to what it would sound like. So what was actually happening? This is a real video of what was actually happening. This is one of the things we saw was that there was organized riot gear kits and face masks being passed out. So we see a video of this right here. What we found, and this was posted by the New York Post. They did the investigation. They did the journalism. They found this isn't just, it was not just the face masks themselves, but there were organized riot gear kits being passed out with papers helping people get out of prison that would help them get connected to the right lawyers and such to get out of prison after they got thrown in prison for protest, for peacefully protesting. right? So the plan was to get violent. That was the plan. So that because they knew that these people are going to get arrested. And this is what's called promoting and abating criminal activity. That's what's happening right here. And these groups can be criminally processed for this. Not just the people that were there, but the people that were funding it, the people that were sending this stuff. And that's what Josh Hawley, however you say his name, if somebody wants to correct me, feel free, is doing right now. Senator launches investigation into Democratic organizations over potential support for LA rioters. I think it's pretty clear now that it wasn't potential support, but it was very clear support. And there's actually a list. If y'all want to see the list of organizations that have been funded by the federal and state governments that are connected to some of the things that are happening here, on X, Data Republican actually did a breakdown of it. And there is a huge spreadsheet that I downloaded and looked into a little bit. There's so much money being funded to organizations that I'm not saying all these organizations are funding criminal activity, but there's a lot that in their statement of purpose and their mission, they could potentially be tied to this. And some of them very, very truly are, in my opinion. It's very likely that they are. Okay, so Josh Hawley, what did he do? He launched an investigation into some of these organizations, one of them being CHIRLA, which is the Coalition for Human Immigrant Rights, on Wednesday. And he said the organization may have an alleged role in financially and materially supporting protests and riots in Los Angeles, which he described as coordinated. The letter addressed to CHIRLA Executive Director Angela Salas notes that credible reporting has indicated that the organization has provided logistical support and financial resources to individuals engaged in these disruptive actions. And he said this, he said, let me be clear. Bankrolling civil unrest is not protected speech. It is aiding and abetting criminal conduct. So what is CHIRLA? I did a little investigation. They founded the Rapid Response Network. If you don't know what that is, the Rapid Response Network is something that they've created. It's a hotline that immigrants can use and other people can use as well to report ICE raids. So they call in this hotline to say that ICE is coming, which is the government holding up the law of the land, right?
Right.
And they essentially, this hotline sends out a text message to everybody on the list saying ICE is coming, and it gives illegal immigrants a chance to hide or protesters a chance to get out on the street and try to stop the raid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which is not peaceful protests, and it's not free speech. It's the opposite. It's a conspiracy, and it's going against the law of the land, and it's stopping the government from being able to do what they're supposed to do, and government officials. This is what Trump says. He says the people that are causing the problem are professional agitators. They're insurrectionists. They're bad people, and they should be in jail. And I agree with him. I'm not saying that everybody that has gotten out and peacefully protest should be in jail. I don't believe that, because I believe in peaceful protests. That's another thing I talked to my daughter about this morning. Was I said, hey, I believe in peaceful protests. I believe in free speech. I never want to see those things go away, because in a free society, we need those things to be able to operate. If the laws are wrong, then you got to change the laws. And one of the ways that we have, as we the people, we have the capacity to do that is to peacefully protest. So LA riots are fueling the fires of this event. And I promise after this, I'm gonna let y'all talk, but this is what's coming out of this. Okay. This was planned months ago, but it's blowing up right now. And I have a sneaking suspicion that it's blowing up right now because of these LA riots. And that was part of the plan. That's my sneaking suspicion, that the LA riots are being funded by the same people that are funding this. Why? Because they want this event to be big. Okay, Trump's protest suppression tactic backfires as No Kings event mushroom after LA confrontations. So what is the No Kings event? Let's look into this. In America, we don't do kings. They're talking about Donald Trump, right? And they've said that very clearly. They've made that statement very clearly. They're talking about Donald Trump. X through the crown. But guess what? The X and through the crown is pretty close to his head, because the crown's on his head, right? In their images that they've used. Mm-hmm. So they're not promoting peaceful protests in my opinion. And look, and I'll just show you through the imagery and through and I don't have that image pulled up, but I'll pull it up in a few minutes, but also through the language. Okay. On June 14th, we peacefully protest. Nope. We rise up. What does that mean? On June 14th, here's all the places in the United States that we're going to be, quote unquote, peacefully protesting. Upcoming calls and trainings. No King's Martial training. Okay. That sounds good. That sounds great. Now, I will say this, to be fair, they do say a core principle behind, this is their disclaimer at the bottom in very small text, behind all No Kings events is a commitment to nonviolent action. Thank God that's there. We expect all participants to seek to de-escalate any potential confrontation with those who disagree with our values and to act lawfully at these events. Weapons of any kind, including those legally permitted, should not be brought to events. That's great. But the problem is the other language that they're putting huge, like this is a good disclaimer, but that should be big on the front, right? And it's not. So I'm gonna throw this up, this image up if I can find it, because this image is, here we go. This is the image. So it's like this image of Donald Trump with the crown on, with the X of the crown. It's just too close to, and then No Kings. It's too close to a violent threat. Like that's what it seems like to me. So I don't like the imagery. But they say this flag doesn't belong to President Trump. It belongs to us. We're not watching history happen. We're making it. Here's what I believe is happening, because they're talking about rejecting authoritarianism, show the world what democracy really looks like. But they are not disregarding what happened in LA. They're using that to fuel the fires of this protest, this march, this nationwide event on June 14th. And I'm going to turn it over to y'all in a second. But in my opinion, this is not we the people of the United States of America. This is another form of king. That's what I'm seeing right here. And it's we're king, and we're going to use the people, the elites that are behind this, to get what we want. All right. What do y'all think about what we're seeing happen?
I agree. I think there's a 0% chance this is a We the People movement. Approximately 0%. This is like the covert influence playbook. I mean, it's exactly what we're seeing. We've seen it time and time again. And I think it's cute that they have this little disclaimer on the bottom, which just gives plausible deniability. And maybe that's in their little pamphlet. It'd be great to get one of those pamphlets and see what's actually in there as far as advice when people go to jail for this. But they'll point to this, since it's like having the DEI program to say, look, we're not racist. We promote all colors of people. And because look at this program and we do education, it's just plausible deniability. But I did see that Kash Patel and the FBI are also investigating the funding of this. And I don't know. I think it's so funny. I get the picture of the dog that smells something, and then he follows the trail, and then he realizes it's his own tail. And that's exactly what, it's like, is the CIA going to be the tail there? Are they involved in this as well? Is it just the Communist Chinese Party? Is it like, who's the tail? But I feel like, this is also an inside job. I don't think it's only, these foreign influences, which I'm sure they're a part of that. And a lot of the U.S. things like the Democratic Party and all these are also captured by foreign influence as well. But that's my take on this. I think there's no chance that this is an uprising. That this is from We the People. This is absolutely totally coordinated and paid for, and that's exactly what it is.
The amount of the evidence that we've had for like paid agitators and that sort of thing in the past, it's really interesting because it even points to I do think the organization will probably have a lot of deniability, unless of course they're able to link funds back to very specific places, because you can have and be like, well, we're coming on the coattails of this LA riot. We're not condemning the LA riots. We're not saying anything like, hey, we're not going to do the LA riots. We're going to do a peaceful version of what that should have been, or something like that. And so even if they are not specifically, even if that organization, which I don't know, behind the scenes, they might be being like, all right, we're going to rile this up as much as we can. Even if they're not the ones that are riling up, it gives the opportunity, and it gives this, like you said, Troy, this very like inflammatory language and mass, and the timing, this mass like potential for other organizations and bad actors to be like, all right, so this is the place, this is where all the protests are going to happen. So let's deliver our bricks, and let's deliver our masks, and let's make this as awful of a thing as we can make it. And we have to remember that what is occurring here, it really is. Although it's not, I'm hesitant to use the term civil war. What we're looking at is a breakdown of political sides, essentially, down to the, like, you know, this is like what happens in third world countries where you have the one leader and you have rebel groups that just make trouble for years and years. It's like that's what we're looking at right now. The left wing, you know, coalition, so to speak, is like cannot abide under right wing government. So what are they going to do? They're not going to peacefully wait for the next election. They're going to be violent and they're going to keep funding agitators, and they're going to make as much trouble as they can. And then they're going to try to use the media, and they're going to try to use their own platforms and stuff to paint Trump as if he's the bad guy this entire time. I'm like, oh, look, Trump is he's the president of chaos and madness. And it's like, you're the ones. It just reminds me of the 2020, like the summer of love or whatever, 2020, when it was like 4 years of left-wing people saying that Trump was going to burn down the country. It was like, Trump's the worst president we've ever had. He's going to burn down the country. And then the last year that Trump wasn't president, those the very same people were the ones literally burning down the country. It's like that meme where the person's on the bicycle and then he sticks a stick into his bicycle spoke and like falls and hurts himself. Like, how could Donald Trump have done this? This is literally what they're doing. They're trying to make it that as much as possible. Because it's the only tool they have right now, because they don't have any legitimate power. So they have to use the worst, most illegitimate power that they can to try to paint Donald Trump in a bad light by making the chaos.
Yeah, I think that when you talk about civil war, though, the idea behind a civil war is that it is a war between people of the same country, right? Like that's the very basic level of this is a war between two different factions in the same country. And this is trying to instigate civil war, but the reality is so far, this isn't civil war. This is an insurrection. This is people coming into our country who don't belong here, who are illegal immigrants, who are paid to be here for the most part. I'm not saying that that's all of them, but there is a good part of, there's a small portion of the people in these riots and in these programs that are American citizens, but the predominant majority of the muscle behind this, I am convinced, don't have the evidence yet, but I think that it will come out. But I am convinced that it is the migrant caravans that were coming over for the past few years, these thousands and thousands of able-bodied young men who are coming over into our country. That's what we're fighting.
Evidence. There's video evidence of one. I talked about this the other day on the live stream, but there's video evidence of one of the rioters who they stopped and they interviewed him. And they said, "Why are you here?" And he said, "Well, we're here to overthrow capitalism, and we want to make this nation a socialist nation." And he said, and they're like, "Are you an illegal immigrant?" And he said, "Oh yeah, definitely an illegal immigrant."
Right.
You know, and it's like, okay, like stating it very plainly.
Mm-hmm. I think. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, it's important to make that distinction. I do think there's a coalition. I think there's a coalition on the left of like, it's not only illegal immigrants that want this, but that's the anarchy that is helpful for the left-wing globalist coalition. Is if we can make this kind of anarchy, then that's going to be helpful for us. It's going to be helpful for our agenda. But of course, they in their cultural Marxism, they're putting forth the illegal immigrant as more important than the privileged native-born citizens. Like they're putting that forth, and then also it's going to be useful for using them to bring in more government control, socialism, and that kind of stuff or whatever. So, but you're right. I mean, I still think it's could be classified as a civil war, but I also think you definitely can classify it as an insurrection. But it's a little more complicated because you have a coalition of like U.S. based agencies funding these things. It's like, what do you call that? It's like, okay, right. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I think this. I mean, we talk about this a little bit like it's these individual pieces that are kind of just coming together, but this is really more of a grand coordinated thing where, I mean, you hear people say things that are just completely out of touch with reality, like what about Trump and about all these things, but that's to give the headline, and then the mainstream media just runs with it. Like that's exactly what happens. Like I talked with Kay Rubachek, and she was in jail in China, and she talked about how in China, they have all their journalists go through a training school, and they just basically learn how to be a part of the propaganda arm for the CCP. Like that's exactly what they do. And if they don't go with what they're supposed to be doing, then they're not going to be a part of that. So it's not real media. They're not real journalists. But they're trained actually formally in that. And in the US, we have the same thing. There's just not formal training. It's just kind of this expectation of you talk and you give these points and you fall in line, or you're just not a part of it. And that's because all the mainstream media is owned by just a few corporations. And I mean, it's not hard to trace that. And like, Doug, I think it's great. I like your point about these caravans. And it's kind of like, I don't have the evidence for it, but it's kind of like, we don't have evidence every day for certain things, but we see it working, like gravity. I mean, we've worked out gravity, and we know the math is there, but whether somebody's seen it or not, you see it working, and you see what's happening, and you just call a spade. And so some of this, it just makes sense. I mean, if you just add it up, it's logically, it makes sense that that's part of what's happening. But again, I don't think there's these big groups of people overseas saying, oh, let's go to the U.S. as individuals and let's overthrow it with socialism. Like, no, those are just people in a tough situation that are being taken advantage of by other people. And maybe they drank the Kool-Aid and they're all about it, but they're just being used for this bigger purpose that is this grand coordinated scheme.
Yeah, well, evidence is a great thing to have, but I think that sometimes as a society, we rely a little bit too heavily on like we need exact proof. And sometimes the proof is just the fruit that you see. Like
exactly.
When people are doing illegal things, do you think you're going to find the proof for that? The whole point behind executing something illegally is to not get caught and therefore have no proof and to cover your tracks. And so what we're watching is illegal things and the fruit of those illegal things coming out. And now we can just kind of point to one thing like, well, I saw this happen with my own eyes and now this is happening. And that seems like a pretty logical deduction in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why June 14th? I want to move on to this because this is kind of important. So this is the reason why. It's not random. It's not a random date. They've been planning it for a while because June 14th is Flag Day. So if you actually go on the website and read it, it says Flag Day. Also, Donald Trump wants wants tanks in the street and a made-for-TV display of dominance for his birthday. That's what they put on the website. A spectacle meant to look like strength. But real power isn't staged in Washington. It rises up everywhere else. So again, sounds like very violent language. Real power isn't staged in Washington. It rises up everywhere else. And then this is a quote from it, from the site. Instead of allowing this birthday parade to be the center of gravity, we will make action everywhere else the story of America that day. People coming together in communities across the country to reject strongman politics and corruption. And the crazy thing about it is you can look at some of obviously they're trying to describe the ICE raids. They're trying to describe, but Donald Trump is just following the law of the land. Yeah. Right. He's just doing what the legislation actually says. And there's ways to change the law if you don't like it. You know, if you want to change the law and allow people into the country that, you know, and just have open borders. But there's a reason why that law hasn't been passed. It's because there's enough common sense minded people in this nation to know that would destroy our country, destroy our economy, destroy our society. Not because everybody that wants to come to this country is bad, but because those that would take advantage of it will take advantage of it if there's no law in place. So these are the people that are behind it actually on the website. So I want to actually go, you can just click on partners here on the website. These are the ones that have their faces on the site. Okay. So all of these organizations, and a lot of these are being funded by government funds, government money. A lot of these organizations are behind or at least get some funding from that.
Not all the USAID money has run out yet. I just want to throw that comment. I know Trump tried to shut down USAID, but a lot of that money is kind of still floating out there. So we'll see how many of these organizations stick around once all of that money is like completely cut off. Actually, I mean, it really makes me wonder. I'm like, if the investigations they're doing, if they're able to go in and finally prosecute and like cut off organizations that like fund agitators and fund this kind of like unemployed behavior, it'd be crazy to see if like all the riots just like went away. They just stopped. You know, it'd be nuts. But, sorry, I had to interject that.
That's good.
Yeah, but obviously we know what places not to support now because they've got their faces on this website. And
you tell me I can't vote for Bernie Sanders anymore?
Oh, dang.
Yeah, I voted for Bernie Sanders 20 times in the last election. I filled out like 100 mail-in ballots for that guy.
That's
hilarious. He never made it to be the.
That's hilarious.
No, Hillary made sure of that.
You know, I just am always impressed, and I shouldn't be, but with the left's ability, the left's and the elite's ability to name things in a noble sounding way that is just doing the exact opposite. I mean, that is like the playbook. And I don't know why conservatives are not able to do that, because they have, for actual noble things, to name them noble thing, like according to what it really is. But like they have the Inflation Reduction Act, which just adds a bunch to the debt. They have the For the People Act, which sounds like pro-democracy, anti-corruption, but actually just centralizes power and federalizes elections, and it does the opposite. We have the Respect for Marriage Act, which just redefines marriage and actually is the Disrespect for Marriage Act. I mean, there's Build Back Better, which was not even an infrastructure bill. Like, they're all this garbage. But this is just another example of, man, like, yeah, that does sound good. And then imagine, it's kind of like, you know, when you saw what was happening for people that were infiltrated in the January 6th thing, where it's like, yeah, you know, they used the good verbiage and all the stuff. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, are they climbing the scaffolding? No, I'm not for that. Wait, what do they do? Like, and it was the infiltrated thing. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. And it's the bait and switch. And I think there's a lot of this here, but there's people who are paid to go further and do the violence and do the agitation. But then there's also people probably that are a little bit ideologically aligned with it. And then they kind of get sucked into it. And so that's sort of how that can happen.
So the New York Post, earlier I mentioned Churla, and that's one of the organizations that the investigation's been launched into, which because there's evidence linking them to actually funding some of the stuff that's happening in LA. Another organization that the New York Post specifically linked to those face masks, those boxes of face masks we saw earlier. New York Post specifically linked them with evidence to an organization called Operation Healthy Hearts. So I love that you just mentioned like how it sounds great, right? The name Operation Healthy
means
Heart.
nothing.
And it's like, no, it's not. It's a criminal organization now. Like that's what it is.
Yeah, it means nothing.
It sounds great. And they're, you know, if you go on their website, I went and did a little research on their website, and it's like, it looks like a good organization. It looks like they're doing good things, but obviously the money is being funneled through to do stuff that shouldn't be done.
Operation Heart of Darkness.
Yeah.
They could relabel the name. That would be helpful for everybody.
Well, like it's like there was this Praxis Labs training I went through in corporate America, and it was like talking about how having, you know, making it equal everybody, and then you go look at the organization and it talks about taking down the white male patriarchy. Like probably shouldn't have hired them to do any corporate training. So maybe look into that a little bit.
Oh my gosh.
I wonder if they have a bit of a bias. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, it's just all in the name. I mean, just trust it. Why should you look into it?
So the White House did a briefing the other day, and Caroline Leavitt actually made this statement kind of connecting the left's ideology to the support for these riots. I mean, you saw it with Gavin Newsom saying, hey, Trump, we don't need the National Guard. We've got it under control. And he's watching the streets burn, right? It's under control. You know, that whole idea of like, well, the kid letting the kid throw the temper tantrum, break some stuff. Like, we can't really do anything about it while they're doing this. We got to just let them finish. You know, that idea, that's what's going on. And it's like the kid has become in control, right? So it's not in control. We're not in control anymore. We got to wait for them to finish. But this is what she said in this news briefing. She said the position of the Democratic Party is that the federal government is not allowed to enforce our laws. And I think she's talking about the public statements that have been made from a lot of the Democratic leaders. Now, I will say there are some, like what's his name? What's the guy's name we talked about the other day, Doug? John, Senator John.
Fetterman?
Fetterman, yeah. Man, I like that guy. Okay, I'm just gonna say it. Even though he's a Democrat, I like him. I think he condemned this as anarchy. He said there's no place in this society for anarchy. You know, and he's like, this is not right. This should never have happened. You know, so there are some people that are anti this. But let's get into who are some of the specific elites that could be behind this. So I want to dive into this. Doug, I know you've got some info. I've got a little bit.
Should we do a poll and get people to like guess, like do a little prize at the end for
100%
the top donor for the?
Yeah, y'all let us know in the comments who you think it is. But there are elites in this nation that are supporting these things, and there's evidence connecting them. Some of them, there's more evidence than others. I'm going to start with the one billionaire Walmart heiress promotes nationwide anti-Trump protests. This is somebody we can connect automatically. She has been running ads in support of the January 14th. I'm going to show you all how these ads have differed over time, though. So this is one of them. This is the ad she ran back in March, and she ran this in all of the major newspapers, several of the major newspapers, and I think it was dozens of newspapers around the country. USA. You know, that's pretty paid political advertisement. Pretty even keel, right? That's pretty mellow, pretty mild. We are the people of principle and honor. All great stuff.
At the bottom, it says attend your town halls and be civil at the bottom.
Yep, attend your show up, attend your town halls.
Read the fine print. Got to read the fine print.
Right. That was this was the one she ran back in March. This one's not so bad, right? But notice how they took the same design and they changed it a little bit. And this is the one she's running for the January 14th. Now there's a crown with the X to it. No kings, June 14th. Sorry, June 14th. June 14th, and then the word mobilize. And then we are the people, the honor, dignity, integrity of our country is not for sale. Our government is of the people, by the people, for the people. It's just, it's like they've gone slightly further, but this is just pointing people back to that website where, again, they have all of that language on there, rise up, all the stuff where it's like, it just doesn't, it feels like they are inciting violence, especially when they're not condemning what happened on what happened in LA this week. They should have that on the front page of that website. We are not going to do this. We condemn this, action, this violence. And so she's one of the people that is behind this, the part of the money trail. She's estimated to be worth $19.3 billion, according to Forbes. And it's crazy stuff. Anyways, I'm going to let you. Sorry.
Well, I was going to ask, did you make the disclaimer about Walmart? I was reading something over here, so and then I heard you. Did you make the disclaimer about Walmart shutting this down, saying they're not a part of it?
No, I didn't say that, but I think that's a good distinction to make.
Hey.
She's not technically she's not a controlling part of Walmart anymore.
Right.
She was the Walmart heiress, but she's not, she married into the family, and then, she's not a part of Walmart anymore, technically. So
yeah, it's an important distinction to make, because Walmart actually has made an official statement saying they have nothing to do with this. And
that's awesome. I'm glad that they've actually done that. They've separated themselves from her. Yeah.
And let's do a little PR lesson here. So when I ran for office, I did they just put the thing out like Cedar Falls man runs for office, because I wasn't a notable person. But if they could find a headline to get people to click it, then they'll get to click. So Forbes says Walmart heiress. So of course they connect it to Walmart. So people are going to click and read that article, whether it has anything to do with Walmart or not. And so I think that's kind of, if you want people to read your headlines, then you got to have something like that in it.
Yeah.
Right.
It could be misleading too, because most people just see the headlines.
No, she doesn't. I'm pretty sure she doesn't live in America, right? Is that accurate, Troy?
I don't know if she lives in America or not, but
I don't think she does. I didn't do a whole
article. Forbes says one of the richest women in America. So I don't know if they're accurate or not, but that's what they say. So whether
I didn't do much research on her, because I knew you were doing that part of the topic, but I feel like I saw something saying that she didn't. So double check us on that, guys, and make sure, see where she lives at. I think she's rich, so she probably has multiple mansions all over wherever she wants to be. So it depends on what her actual main home is, I guess, at that point.
Yeah. Doug, I'm gonna let you take it from here. I didn't dive deep into her because I knew that you needed time to be able to share. I know you've got some cool stuff to share, so I'm gonna let you go ahead and take it over. And I'm gonna add this, if I can, to the stage.
All right, cool. You're gonna do a little swap.
Yeah. There we go.
Okay, so I just thought this was an interesting, little soft intro to the rest of this information. But of course, we have Chrissy Teigen. She came out just recently as a proponent for the No Kings movement. And what I want to point out, that I think it's really interesting that this whole No Kings thing is really just honing in on Trump. And I agree with the general sentiment of, we don't want any one person running the country, right? We need our checks and balances, all that good stuff. But why just now? Why is this happening with just Donald Trump? I don't really fully understand that. And what I have a tendency to do is I look at the people who were opposed to Donald Trump, and oftentimes I find that I completely disagree with almost everything they stand for, and I generally don't like them as a person. And that is pretty telling to me. So here's one really telling sign that if Chrissy Teigen is for or against something, you might want to be on the opposite side of the fence of whatever she's on, because it's not a good place to be. Just going to throw that out there. That's my personal opinion.
I don't know who that person is. I've never heard of her.
Yeah.
Before.
I mean, in summary, it's because Trump is destroying the establishment. I mean, that he's destroying the way things were and the global elites, and he's not a globalist. And so that's why all these people are against him. He's probably one of the first presidents in modern history that was not helping the globalist agenda move forward. He's actually destroying it. And he's doing it at a foundational level, and people are getting more involved. And so to me, it's kind of making a long-term impact what he's doing, because it's waking people up and it's giving people hope, and it's getting people to get into politics and be more interested in what's going on. So that to me is why they're saying, oh, we don't want a king, but actually it's going the opposite direction. It's actually removing whether it's an oligarchy or whatever, but it's removing the centralized control, and they're basically marketing it as the opposite. They want to get rid of centralized control, but really what they want to do is get back on the track toward centralized control.
Right. Yeah. I think the big problem is we have an executive branch in the government, and Donald Trump is actually acting like the head of the executive branch, unlike some of the previous presidents, and they don't like the fact that somebody's the head of the executive branch that they don't agree with, and so as long as he's acting within the bounds and scope of that position, then it's like we need to, as a society, we need to go along with that. Why? Because that's the type of government we have, but I agree with you, Doug. I think we all should get don't agree with Christy Teigen tattoos so that we never forget, it'd be awesome.
We need of her face with the crown on top, and nope, she doesn't need to be queen either.
If I could be philosophical for a moment, I think it even goes beyond that just a little bit. I think this is. I'll try to interject this and be very quick about it. But when we talked about civil war earlier, one thing I think that's worth noting as far as how come the right and the left at this point have such a difficult time being on the same page about literally anything. What you guys are talking about right now, they're there's no king's protest. It's wait, well, what about during the COVID restrictions Biden was putting into place? Oh no, this is okay, this is acceptable. It's wait, that was really authoritarian. So you notice it's not actually about the laws. It's not actually about who's in power. It's not actually about any sort of thing like that. What it is, the way that I view it, is we have two different countries in the United States occupying the same geographical area. So when you talk about civil war, I mean, it really is. The culture war has been like this for the longest time. We have two completely different countries, two different cultures, two different nations, the left and the right. And there's some overlap, obviously, but largely they're very different nations, and we exist in the same geographical area. And so what's legitimate power in the eyes of the people is never actually the specific laws on the books. And it's not actually well, this guy's in charge, so he can do what he wants. That's legitimate power. Or even, this is controversial, what the Constitution says. What the Constitution says is not what ends up being legitimate power in the eyes of the people. Though what is legitimate power is what meets the national identity. So if you have a nation, and that nation has an identity, and that nation has a culture, then whatever is supporting that and fits within that parameter, that will be seen as legitimate power and legitimate political action by the people. If it's breaking the national identity, if it hurts the national identity, if it hurts the national culture, then it will be seen as illegitimate power. So I'll try to do this little metaphor here. The right is one country, the left is another country. Anytime the left is in power and is doing something, the right just decries, oh, you're breaking the Constitution, you're breaking this, you're breaking that. Well, when the right's in power, the left says the exact same thing, right? They say the exact same thing. So who's correct? Who has the correct? We have two different versions of the Constitution. We have two different versions of law. And I could get more into this as what does the left see as government? What does the right see as government? But it is essentially, and as a right-wing person, I would say that I think the right has more legitimate claim over, no, this is the actual better interpretation of the Constitution. This is actual better intended. But the left does not care about that. They don't care about that. They have their national identity, and it's very different from the conservative right's national identity. And so if you're not doing something that helps their national identity, then it's not a legitimate power in their eyes. And so that's kind of what we have going on here. I just get a little philosophical, but that's the divide. It's not, when people get nitty gritty and be like, well, the law says this, so everyone should be okay with this. It's that's not what's going on here. We have two different cultures who cannot abide with the other one ruling over the other.
So
Brian, you go and then I'll go.
Yeah, this is very important. And I have a recommended resource that's very quick and easy for everybody to consume. And I'm excited to show it to you in just a second. But I think this is very important, is a fundamental misunderstanding of the Constitution and of law and the rule of law. And people don't have, there's only one right view of it. It's not as complicated, and we give too much credibility to the left. But I have a recommended resource here. This is the Constitution for Babies. And so I want to recommend that everybody read this. And I have another one here about the importance of voting. Now, this is the fascinating journey of a baby who learns how to vote and be active and talk to political candidates and be engaged. And so I want to highly recommend these for all my friends who are constitutionally challenged and want to get in there and learn a little bit about that.
Is that why your feet dropped out? Did you go get those books?
That's right. I had to go get these off the shelf here. I didn't have them behind me on my shelf.
We can read through those while we're getting our tattoos. So here's my thought on what you said, Reese. That is why I agree with you 100%, and that is exactly why I get people push back against me, because I take stands sometimes supporting things, not supporting the ideologies of the left, but supporting things that people on the left do when it's the right thing. People like John Fetterman. The reason I support him in some ways, and I mention his name in a positive light, and people like him, is because when somebody who I disagree with ideologically does something that is right, like fundamentally right, or support something, and he said no, he condemned the LA riots and said this is anarchy. And so I said, good job, like, to him. And I let people know I agree with what he's saying. Why? Because I think as somebody on the right, somebody that's more conservative, I'm going to do anything I can do to help bridge that gap and heal some of the wound that's taking place, because there's nothing else we can do. If we don't do that, if we don't fight for some sort of unity in this nation, we are headed for civil war eventually. We are headed for more and more, of a gap. I mean, when we were making the Outlier film last year, which y'all can go watch that on this channel if you want, there's a version of it on this channel. But I put things into that film on purpose, like President Biden saying, we condemn any act of political violence in this nation, even though obviously I think he's probably speaking through his teeth or whatever, it's like, I don't, it's like he probably was not too happy that Donald Trump was still around after that, or, after whatever, it's like, I'm not, but at the same time, I'm going to put forth the things that I agree with that he said. Right. Absolutely. And say, hey, this was right, because I want to support the unity and the bridging of that gap, because at the end of the day, yelling at the other side is never going to change anyone's mind.
No,
but as an individual who cares about society and cares about people, and as a Christian who loves people with the love of Christ, at the end of the day, I'm like, hey, if I can have a conversation with you and be civil and actually treat you like a human being, and you walk away from that, then I've helped to heal something, and maybe eventually you will change your mind. Right? I planted a seed there that potentially could affect somebody, but you're never going to change your mind if I'm throwing stuff at you and yelling at you all day long, and that's it. That's all you ever know, So I would like to make that statement, and that's why I kind of take the stand I do sometimes, even though it's not exactly aligned with what I believe ideologically.
Sure.
Yeah, well said.
I do think I agree with that 100%. I think, especially like in one-on-one context, like it's shocking that I've had literally conversations on a production floor with people who are shouting, and then all of a sudden you actually dive a little, and like one or two layers below, like you actually want the same thing, you just agree on how it should be implemented. And that's but the problem is, like, I'm very cautious of giving credence or giving recognition to people, elites, who are saying the right things but doing absolutely nothing about it. Like if you look at Gavin Newsom saying how what he wants in order, and we got to have this and that and this and that, and then but he's letting this happen in LA, and then he says, but then Trump's coming in to militarize and everything, and it's kind of like, well, you that is not at all aligned with what you just said, and exactly. So it's kind of like this misleading thing. Yeah, it's like a cover.
Speak louder than words, and I'm going to support someone's actions, a lot more than I support what they say, because what they say does not always lead to doing the right thing.
Yeah, and I agree with 100% of everything you said. I'm giving a caveat to say that sometimes if I'm careful to, and I'm not saying you do this, but people, if they give too much credence to the other side or the left when they say the right things, people take their foot off the gas and they stop doing offense and like, oh, okay, good. Yeah, that's fine. And that's exactly what the left wants. They want the framing, and what they say publicly, and then what they do privately, or what they do behind the scenes when people aren't paying attention. And sadly, most people are not paying attention. And so that's why I'm very cautious of that, or at least when I do say that, I try and show what might be behind it and that sort of thing. But I do fully agree, though, that we should point out when the other side is doing the right thing.
Yeah.
No, we should. And my point was not to actually, honestly, to legitimize the left at all. Like I really do. It's to frame what exactly that we're up against as a nation, as a country, because what you essentially have is you have one group of people whose primary goal and like desire is order and security, and sees, and this is the right's view of government. The right-wing view of government is that the government's job is to provide order first and foremost, a legal system and enforcement system that's fair and like treats everybody the same across the board. Make an ordered system, basically a wall around a city, right? Make this wall around the city, as a metaphor, and then inside the city is the people, and the people get to decide how they want to live, and they create the culture and they create life, and then the people get to decide how compassionate to be and how tolerant to be. It's not the government. The government makes a wall. The government says this is what's fair. It's fair for everybody across the board, and then the people create the culture, create the society. The left's view of government is fundamentally different. The left's view of government is the government's primary job is to enforce the compassion and tolerance that they want enforced, which ends up being equity. And the reason it becomes mutated and it's not a virtue anymore is because it's not balanced with any sort of order. So that's why it's so easy. And this is why, and I somebody brought this up in the comments. They were like, well, what about January 6th, which we've mentioned a couple of times? Well, if you notice the difference, January 6th was not helpful for the right-wing cause. One, January 6th was a Fed thing anyways. It wasn't actually like Trump supporters doing most of the violence. So there's that whole, you can get into all that kind of stuff. We're like, this was actually Fed instigated and all that kind of thing. But besides that, every right-wing person came out and was like, condemned it. I was like, this is terrible. This isn't what we support. We're the side of order. We're the side of order and peace. And like nobody on the right likes it. On the left, you have these groups and you have these people that are funding. They love this stuff. They love the right. And they've funded way more. I mean, you have one January 6th incident. Think about the Summer of Love and now this right. And then like it was like in the riots that we're about to have. It's just like you have it's actually they want the disorder because they don't see the government's job as creating order and creating peace. They see the government's job as pushing this agenda for equity for anybody that they think isn't receiving enough, compassion and isn't being promoted enough. We're going to push it, right? But they have this. It's again, I say it sounds like a virtue, but without the virtue of order, it's twisted and actually is a vice. And so anyway, so that's the way that I look at it, where I'm like, okay, this is an illegitimate country trying to operate inside of a legitimate country, whether you're centrist or right or mid-left or mid-right, people that want law and order and are like, yeah, of course the federal government can enforce their laws. Like, what's wrong with the federal government enforcing the laws? People that are okay with that, they're on the side of having a nation. People that want the disorder, like they're basically operating, I would say, like a different country inside of our country. And that, I would consider that to be an insurrection.
Well, okay. Let me pull this back to the center a little bit here. That's all great.
Go for it, Doug.
I've got a ton of stuff to go over. So
yeah, go for it.
Let's jump into that. And I'll try to get through it a little bit quicker. We'll see. But so one of the biggest points that I wanted to make with this was the concept behind this No Kings movement is that it is a grassroots organic uprising. And that's what they're pushing all over the place. They're saying that this is the people rising up. This is America rising up against tyranny, against Donald Trump, right? And I wanted to make some points about how that is absolutely the opposite of the case. And we've kind of covered that a little bit, but I've got some extra things to point out here. Number one, coming from a website kind of background where I understand how all this stuff works, and this is a basic concept. You're going to recognize really quickly when you start going through all this stuff that this is a very well-funded movement and program. So Indivisible is like the overarching name of a couple different groups, right? They are 100% behind this No Kings. They are helping fund it, right? Everything connected to it. And this is a big spider web too. It's going to be really hard to find the exact root of this. But when you just go through and you look at some of these websites, understand that number one, these websites cost money, not only to make, but to run and to employ people to monitor, right? This is a lot of stuff. So I'm just going to go through a couple of these are really nice, big websites that have a lot going on with them, okay? You don't have a grassroots organic movement that has websites that are this nice and this well put together in general. That's just not typically a thing. This is the Indivisible project, their open secrets. So this is their contributions out, and I'm not sure exactly where that that goes, to be honest. But here's another example of their websites. This is No King's Day of Action, right? So here we have evidence that the Indivisible organization is fully behind the No Kings, which is the website that Troy was sharing earlier, which, once again, look at that website. It's beautiful. It's executed really, really well. This funding is...
They've got their marketing down. Yeah,
they do. And so what's really crazy about this is this is the same one that Troy was at earlier. The amount of information and different websites connected through all this just proves how much money is funneling into this project. And this money isn't coming from the $5 that John down the street donated because he voted for Biden last term. You know what I mean? It doesn't build up like that. This is more than just your regular donations. And these are websites that are packed full of information on how to protest, where to protest, what to do about it, where to get the stuff, which, by the way, there are allowances. Like, you can literally get some of this stuff tax deducted. You can get money for some of it if you fill out the right forms on here, that they will pay for you to go do this. And not only that, but that's in addition to, like I saw earlier, there was some ads running on Craigslist for paying people to disrupt, is what it basically was. Like, actors, like they're saying, like, strong, and it was like thousands of dollars. They're like, we want you out here on this day to make sure that you can handle the situation. The way they word it is very careful, of course, but there's a lot of evidence that this is not really organic at all. And I think that that's one of my biggest tiffs with it, is because what's happening is we are being told that this is an organic movement and that this is the people uprising, right? Which makes it appear as though this is what the people want for America, which the reality is this is actually more like a handful of rich people behind the scenes wanting a change. They want the regime change. I'm sure that there are people in America who do want a regime change, but not these people. They're not the kind of people who have the time and the resources to go create a riot in the streets, right? And just another example of like all the many things that they have. Like, this is just more material, more resources that you can go find to be a part of this whole uprising, quote unquote. Another website, 50 protests, 50 states, one day. This is all in reference to the June 14th day that they want to resist and uprise and all that. When I started going down this rabbit hole, I looked at some of the resources that they have for how to plan for this, right? So this is one of the sites that has links to different stuff. I accidentally got into one of the Google Docs too. I don't know how it happened. I clicked on one of these resources and it dropped me into the Google Doc, and I was like, what is this? This is the strangest thing. And then like, I noticed that all my because I was logged into my Google, so I noticed all my information like jumped in there too. And I was like, whoa. So I exited it real quick. So I was like, I don't want to be part of this, but I couldn't get back in there. So I don't know what that was. That was there's some sort of like this. It's there.
You hacked the Matrix.
It felt like it for a second, but it was just so I was like, okay, weird.
Control Alt Delete, done.
Hey, when I was in college, the professor accidentally uploaded one time the actual test to Blackboard instead of the test prep sheet, and then quickly realized it 5 minutes later and deleted it. But I had already downloaded it because I logged in as soon as it was supposed to be up, and I got it, and I sent it, and to my shame, I sent it to everybody in the whole class.
Nice,
because that's the kind of person I was back then. And then anyway,
I didn't even right.
Yeah. So I'll have to tell that story another time.
So in here, you can find a bunch of different like you see planning template, sample safety plan, media advisory. This is all guidance on how to execute a protest to the utmost with the least amount of consequence. Basically, is what a lot of these come down to. Campaigning guides for so. These start to get more and more degrees away from the No Kings, but this is all resources that are being used for the No Kings. So it's very tricky because you can't, like, if you were to just look at this one website, you'd be like, what does that have to do with anything? But this is like my rabbit trail of coming, like starting with No Kings and going through the process of, oh, here's more resources. Oh, here's more resources. Okay. So this is just crazy. Like, honestly, conservatives don't do this. This isn't a thing. Like, I have never seen anything like this on the conservative side. And if they do, I'd like to see it, and then I found another, here's one I want to point out. This is one of the resources, right? There's interesting.
Other forms of direct action.
Are these all like tied to nonprofits, or are they just kind of websites that are standing there?
They're all tied to nonprofits.
Got it. I'm sure you're probably going to make the point I was going to make. I'll wait.
Yeah.
Conflict is good.
Conflict is good. So they're not saying be violent, but they're suggesting
activism is about making trouble.
I was about to read that. Activism is about making trouble. Wow. Okay.
There was a really particular.
Oh my gosh. Those in power do not listen to reason, information, or moral arguments.
This is like some serious manifesto.
That's a little bit past the line there. That's not really.
That's crazy.
So the degree to which, right, we're right here. The degree to which you can make trouble can vary from changing the system from the inside, for example, by going into politics, to blowing up pipelines.
Interesting example there.
Isn't that like, why, if that's not your intention, why would you use that as an example, right? This is just one example of all the stuff that's packed in behind this movement. Okay. And one of the, here's another example of a website that's well put together. No Voice Unheard is part of this movement as well. And they've got more resources here for attendees, for organizers. Make your voice heard. Like, this is just, you don't have stuff like this that is cheap, right? Here is a lot of our viewers might have already seen some of this, actually. The Indivisible, the same like, you can basically say that No Kings is indivisible. Okay. At this point, like, they're one and the same. They're so intertwined. And these guys are behind the Indivisible organization.
Whoa.
They've been doing this for a while.
The co-founders of Indivisible hold online training session, instruct radical supporters behind Tesla attacks how to avoid federal snooping.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
In this, they actually did I think it was a Zoom or anyway, a video conference where they talked about how you can like skirt around legal monitoring of your activities, right? Which on the one hand, I'm like, well, I mean, I get it. If you want to use a particular app that is, encrypted, like they use Signal app, they're suggesting use the Signal app to communicate with, not your regular text messaging. That kind of makes sense, but these guys are millionaires and they're behind this, so their money is going right into it. They have, let's see,
how did all these communists make all their money? That's what I want to know.
They do exactly what they have criticized Trump for doing. Basically, they have business ventures, they have their donations, they pay almost no taxes, they know how to get around all of it, and it's not loopholes either, it's legal stuff for the most part, but they understand how to invest so that they can keep investing and keep making more money, and there is a process behind it. It just takes a while to make happen.
I mean, once you get to a point where you can live off of 5% of your investments, then you can live off 5% of investments, and then the investments grow themselves. Like, I mean, if that's what it is, and people, you can invest in the market, you can invest in companies, you can invest in all real estate, all kinds of things. But once there's a certain level, it's just multiplying.
Yeah. And you create foundations or programs or organizations that are nonprofit, and then you can write it off, and then you get more money from that write-off, and then you can just keep funneling it into other.
Yeah. And I'm sure we'll get into it, but I put a note here in case you don't go to it, but we need to talk about what you called legal as far as use of that money for influence in politics. If it's just because something's legal, we need to talk about whether it should be legal.
I don't necessarily mean that it's all legal. Some of this is illegal. It's just there's a blind eye turn to it. So
right.
But one of the things
what you just showed is illegal. Like what they were doing, like helping people destroy Tesla vehicles without getting caught, without getting monitored. I mean, that's illegal. That's directly
but there's gray areas.
directly tied to that's crazy.
Wow.
One of the things that really frustrates me about some of these things is like their nonprofit status and how they can be so politically involved, because the way that nonprofit works is you're not supposed to be able to take a political stance. You're not supposed to be able to say that you either support or don't support political heads, because you're no longer a nonprofit at that point. And so these guys are getting.
Let me share. Go ahead.
No,
go ahead, Ryan.
Well, I was going to say,
know more about it than I do, but I know there is some distinction there.
Go ahead. I mean, you can give the distinction, but I think that the idea of nonprofits not being able to speak politically, I don't necessarily think that should be the case. I mean, I think people should be able to say what they want to say. Organizations can take a stance they want to take. The problem is the structure and way it's set up, which makes it look like transparency, but it's the opposite of transparency. And I don't know if you guys know what dark money is, that term that gets thrown around a lot, but I can share quickly what that is if you want to now, or we can talk into it a little bit.
Are you talking about super PACs? You're talking about people donate to super PACs and the
super PACs or nonprofits? I mean, that's exactly what that's exactly what these are. I mean, dark money, basically. I mean, I'll just say, like, when you run for office, you have to report to the government every dollar that comes in. Like in Iowa, it was every dollar over $25. If somebody gave you a $24 donation, you don't have to report it. If they give you a $26 donation or more, you have to report their name and their address to the government for who donated that money to you. And there's a limit for each state has limits on what individuals can donate to campaigns. However, for PACs and nonprofits and those sorts of things, yes, when they give you $1,000 to your campaign, you got to report that money came from that PAC or that nonprofit. But you know who doesn't need to report where their money came from? That PAC and that nonprofit. That's what dark money is. And that's why people like George Soros and the Koch brothers and all these people can give money to hundreds of organizations that they set up, and it makes it look like a grassroots movement. But none of those organizations report where that money came from. But then they give that money earmarked, which is illegal. But how do you prove it? Earmarked, they give it to these campaigns and these organizations. So that's what dark money is where it's coming from, that you don't know where that came from, but only the top organization.
Yeah.
And there's probably not like a written agreement of where they're going to send the money, but they know if they don't do what they're supposed to do with the money, they're not getting any more, so.
Well, I mean, you have a purpose of what they're existing for. And it's not like literally it's, if I go and set up something, they're going to do what I set it up for because I'm still controlling it, or the person I put in charge of the person in charge is controlling it. And so they know their agenda. They know what they're supposed to be doing. And that's why we have district attorneys that are not prosecuting obvious crimes in places like California, because those district attorneys, those are not going to prosecute what they're not supposed to prosecute according to the people that funded them and got them elected. That's exactly the problem. And that is exactly why we have the laws saying, if it's under $1,000, it's not, you can't, they're not going to be prosecuted. It's not a crime to steal something under $1,000. But you have stores that say, okay, everything in here is $1,500, but you need a coupon. So then it gets down to the normal price. So that's a good way to get around that. Get your coupons, and then they can take people to prosecute them. But
so buy my $1,000 toaster.
That is
Doug,
a genius.
Let's keep going down the rabbit hole, Doug.
Kudos to the business owners, because that is a genius.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, we got a couple more levels deeper here, and these aren't going to be surprising, by the way. I found the connection. So here's a little information on the Indivisible project. Notice how much revenue they make right here. That I believe that's what 12,565,000, right? Yeah, and expenses like for I don't even
12,700,000.
These are large. Well, because it's good for a business to
show a loss.
To show a loss, because then they can buy it.
That's good.
I bet
the CEO or whatever, they got paid pretty well though.
Well, yeah, those two. What was their name? Ezra, the founders. These guys
got paid pretty well.
Oh yeah, and they have actually gotten in a lot of trouble for that before. People have noticed that they have quite the income for running a supposed nonprofit.
Extortion.
Yeah, this is, and I want to note real quick before I forget, I really want to I've got a lot of this information. I want to put it in when we get this video done. I want to put this information somewhere so that people can go back and look at this. And I'm going to put together like a little, like, here with my trail kind, so you can follow it too for our viewers. You can go in through and click these links and see for yourself what this stuff is, and do a little bit more research on it, because you might find more things than what I found. But this is a little bit more information on it. This This article ties these two in Indivisible Group directly to shock of all shocks, George Soros. I mean, I hate to be like this, the typical conservative George Soros is the boogeyman, but he really is. We just got to call a spade at some point. Like, he really is behind this. Nearly $8 million of George Soros money has been donated to this group. Not only that, but he's got money all over the place in this. And
so you just directly linked George Soros to the June 14th protests.
Yes,
potentially to the LA riots, if there's a link there. But
because the Indivisible Project is behind the LA riots.
Oh yeah,
they are the ones who were helping fund that as well. Their hand has been in this for a while. And so one of the other points I want to make was, let's see, where is it? I leave these on certain spots because there's something here I wanted to point out. I think this is just more proof that Indivisible is connected to Soros. This is where it says, though Indivisible says it's fueled by smaller donations at the national level, it has received nearly $8 million from liberal billionaire George Soros Open Society foundations. So another way how they get around it is not George Soros isn't writing a check, it's all of his foundations. And the Open Society Foundation is George Soros, right?
Yeah, that's his organization.
A lot of this. And so here, I just went through, here's Open Society Foundations, their website. They have grants that you can apply for and get money for, right? Well, here's Indivisible Project, which is the same thing. And this is where the 8 million comes from, like a compilation of all of these, okay? What people might say, and I was going to anticipate this argument, is if you look at these years seem to have nothing to do with what's going on, right? They've just been getting hundreds of thousands of dollars over the year since 2018, okay? But I will point out that I went and I found the domain information on nokings.org. Here we have nokings.org, right? And this domain was purchased in 2018.
2018.
This has been planned for a long time. These are all the same people. So
that was during Trump's first term.
Yeah. So the website wasn't live. It only went live in May, from what I understand. I could be wrong on that, but it went live in May, and they're pretending like all of a sudden we have this No Kings movement.
So this was a plan. If Trump won a second term in 2020, this was a plan to be implemented then, and now it's coming back around to first year in office in 2024 or 2025, and now they're implementing it. That's crazy.
Yes. They gave the green light. And here's some more Open Society.
Good job spoofing, Doug. That's nuts. That's a crazy connection.
That is really cool. That is a really interesting thing to be like that. This even just the name No Kings has been sitting out there since 2018. They're like, we didn't have to do it because Trump didn't get reelected. Of course, I'm sure that the same organization was funding all kinds of riots and stuff during 2020.
Yeah, they've been active.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I was on here and I was scrubbing through the No Kings website and some of the partners that they have, right? And I was just basically taking their names and dropping them into the Open Society Foundations. And a lot of them you can't find in here, just to be totally clear. But a few of them, the bigger ones, like the Tides Foundation, which is just a sister of the Indivisible Project, right? It also has contributions from George Soros, aka the Open Society Foundation. And so I just pulled out the top three: Tides Foundation, Indivisible, and then the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union. This is another big one that has contributed to the No Kings movement. When you go over back to this page, and see right there, ACLU. And these guys also have received lots and lots of money from the George Soros Foundation. So you dig down to the root of this. This is pretty much a George Soros funded movement. And so my message to the American people is, if you are part of the No Kings movement, you are fighting exactly what you are working with exactly what you're told you're fighting against, which is the rich and powerful elite. Because what they're saying is, we're sick of the rich elite running everything. And you're doing it. You're part of that, because what you're doing is literally funded by the rich elite left class.
Yeah.
There's no way around it. This is not organic. This is
So
not natural.
Crazy.
I think, I just think it's interesting. You know what they call in politics someone who is influential behind the scenes and controls access to all these kinds of things? They're called a kingmaker.
Wow.
So it's a little ironic here. The political kingmaker. It's like no kings.
Yeah.
Well, the kingmakers are doing a no kings movement so they can have the kings that they want, not the kings that the people want. But we don't want a king, but you understand the values and the influence that the people want.
Yeah.
It's crazy how they say grassroots, but it's not actually grassroots. It's been planned since 2018.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of evidence to show. I mean, I do think there, I see a lot of centrist arguments for people in the middle who don't want to take a side are always like, well, the right has like their billionaires and the left has their billionaires and that sort of thing. But I think there's a lot of arguments to show that when it comes to the actual real right-wing movements and things happening on the right, that it's not funded and set up in this same kind of way that you see like a lot of these riots and sort of stuff happening on the left. And specifically, my biggest evidence for that is the fact that Donald Trump has been elected twice now, when even on the right-wing establishment, did not want Donald Trump to be elected.
Exactly. There's plenty of on the right.
So who's the populist guy on the left? The populist guy on the left is Bernie Sanders. Well, Bernie Sanders was not allowed, even though he was like the most popular candidate on the left, especially among young people. Bernie Sanders was never allowed to become.
Yeah, they changed rules.
They just changed the rules. They just whatever they had to do to block him out because the left establishment was like, no, we don't like you. You're not really. You're a little too populist. You're not really establishment enough, and so they blocked him out. Well, the right-wing establishment, and the rhinos and all that kind of stuff, they tried to do the same thing to Trump. It just didn't work. And so that's where it's part of where it's like, this is where I think the largest evidence that on the right, it's not actually just controlled by, well, whatever our billionaires say, where it trickles down and then we're doing that. It's like there's actually more of a, as I pointed out before, like a nation that's like, no, we have a real culture. We have a real identity. We're for order. We're for peace. This is what we want. And people that are doing that, we support them. Sounds great. Yeah. That's what we want. We don't want these shadowy organizations and shadowy figures funding chaos in order to, push these sort of globalist agendas. It doesn't matter what fancy names they give it or what nice titles they give it. It's like like y'all said before, you see the fruit of it. The fruit of one is like order and peace and security, and the fruit of the other is like chaos and madness. And they're like, no, this isn't how you run a country. This isn't what we want. So that's sort of I hear like the centrist arguments coming out of like, well, the people on the right have you had Elon Musk donated a lot of money and stuff like that. And it's just like, well, this is the difference.
I have one closing thought. I know we're probably getting close to the end here, but the way we need to see this is, and this is why I even talk about like pastors and church leaders and teachers. We need to be talking about what's going on in the public square, because it's not the same as before. Like, 50 years ago, the left brings their ideas, the liberals bring their ideas, the right brings their ideas, and we debate them in a civil manner, and we do it that way. But today, it's like a boxing match, and then all of a sudden, the guy pulls a knife out and breaks the rules, and then other people from outside are throwing stuff. Now, I'm not saying we should pull the knife and do all that, but we should stop pretending like the other person is just fighting with boxing gloves and playing by the same rules. And that's why we need to be playing offense and not just defense. And we need to wake up to the reality of the culture war that we're in right now. And so that's where we need to really just be close with the Lord and know what he's called us to do and be able to take that stand. But at the same time, not be naive about the reality of what's going on here. We're not just debating intellectual ideas in public. Like, that is not what's happening here.
Yeah.
So we are hitting the 1:15 mark, so we're going to have to close. We're going a little long today, but I want to pray before we end for Saturday, just for protection for people, that the riots would not turn violent, that things would go the best possible way they could go, and that people would just not show up. I mean, in the first place, that it would rain, that would be raining or whatever needs to happen, for people not to show up. So Jesus, we pray right now. We just ask, Lord, that you would be with everybody in all of these cities where these protests are planned for Saturday, that you would protect the civilians, Lord, the businesses, you protect people's vehicles, you protect the people in these cities, Lord, but also that you would just shut down these protests from becoming violent in any way, Lord, that there would just be angels, that there would be a hedge of protection, God, that there would just be whatever needs to happen, rain, whatever needs to happen, so that no violence takes place on Saturday, and so that the best possible outcome could come from this, Lord. And also that you would just give authorities wisdom, the police wisdom, and the military, if necessary, whatever it is, that you would give wisdom and help people to make the right decisions to be able to intercept things and stop things from happening, and that there would just be protection all around in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so yeah, we saw Greg Abbott is already planning on having the National Guard out there in Texas for the protest. So
This is
they've
why
already- they've
Texas
already
is
got-
the land of the
Surprise-
free.
Yep.
I wanted to shout out we had a new member, if I can say this name right, Cherky Love O. Peters. Thanks for becoming a YouTube member. And thank you for everybody that's commenting and showing so much support and joining the conversation. Now, we weren't able to put a lot of comments on the screen today, but we're reading the conversations that are happening in the chat and kind of responding to it a little bit in our language. So thanks for being a member.
Yep. Great to see everyone. Y'all go check out the exclusive membership options on YouTube and Locals if you haven't looked into that. And we'll see y'all next time.